First of all, welcome to the Super Survey 2017 results. I want to say thank you for the 1,326 people that actually responded to it. It was really fun to look through all the data, and it took me a lot longer than I anticipated. But for those who don't know, I had the survey out for 4 days, and I got 1,326 responses, and I closed it after 4 days because there were so many mistakes in it. Like, a question was totally bad. There was spelling mistakes. I misspelled Schaefer. So yeah, I closed it, and there was good enough responses, so I will put this together. But I really want to do a lot better job next year. I want to do it again next year, and that way we can see how this community grows and shapes, and maybe things change. Maybe, people move to different brands or whatever. But first I want to say this is just because of microphone. I need this microphone because if I use my webcam, it'll have so much echo, it'll be bad. So, yes. And for those who want to go to the giveaway, it'll be at the end of this video that you can learn exactly how you can win a Lamy Aeon, which is my favorite pen, and I use it every day. I know it's still not available in the US, which is why I want to do this pen as a giveaway. No, I'm not going to give you my pen. I am actually going to go buy you one. So that's going to be at the end of the video. So let's go right into the results. So the first question was about age. And, there's not too much to know about this. I mean, the biggest age group is, around 24 to 30, which is 22% of the people. And one of the things that I need to do for next year is, I don't know why I did it, but I did 50 plus. Like, 50 isn't that old, and I'm sorry for those who fell into that group and made them feel old, but I don't know why I did 50 plus. I think I looked at a different survey of, just suggestions, and it stopped at 50, so I should have known to, extend it out. But so next time that'll be better. So 51 plus is the second largest group in this fountain pen community. The next we have gender. I think this is also not that surprising. It's 65% male, 34% female, and 1% of the survey responders said they were other, as in non-binary, trans, agender, etc. Don't mean to offend, but there's a lot of listed. And here's something that was interesting for me. It was left or right-handed. I'm personally left-handed, and I know it's a bigger problem in my other hobby, which is golf. And since we only make up 10% of the population, certain manufacturers don't want to manufacture things for left-handed players. So it's good to see that 10% is the same for, this overall community. But since it's not as big of a factor, it's, I guess, not as important. But to me, it was interesting. Going on to, so this question, I wanted to know if people really wanted to collect pens as, how they collected pens, if they really were concentrating on using them or if they wanted to make them look pretty. So I watch Matt Armstrong's videos, and in one of his videos right before he went to the Seattle Pen Show, he was talking about how there's almost like a difference in the community where you're either a collector or you're a user, where you collect the pens that are pretty and unique and that sort of stuff, and then there's a growing portion of the community that is just about using them on a daily basis, and maybe about saving money over inks over time or something like that. So that's where this question came from. So I think I may have worded it wrong, where that's why only 12% of people identified as collectors. So maybe I didn't do the collector's description well enough. So maybe I'll work with somebody next time about who exactly is a collector, so they can, describe why they consider themselves a collector and that sort of stuff. But so the way that it seemed from the people that responded to this survey was that 88% of people consider themselves a fountain pen user and not just a collector. So, but again, I think that's a little bit of a malformed question, but here we go. So how many pens does everybody own? Obviously, everybody, posts their, their collections and things like that. So, but it seems that the majority of people have, 4 to 10, which is, it's a good amount, especially with how expensive pens can be. And then the next largest group is 11 to 25. So more than half of everybody owns somewhere between 4 and 25 pens. So that's also a really big range. So maybe next year I will let people put in the exact numbers so that way we can get some more specific data. It's very interesting. Excuse me. So this is a little bit of extra information that I kind of extrapolated. So for how many pens people own by how old they are, I wanted to see if people just steadily collected pens over the years, and by the time they were 51 plus, which, again, this is the only group I had, if they just happen to have a lot of pens because they acquire them over the years, or I was wondering if maybe there might have been a peak of a large collection size when, you're making lots of money and you just keep buying, and then when you're older, you get rid of them. So that was my intent of this question. But I think it was the first scenario that I described where people were collecting pens and they acquired them over years because, obviously when you're younger than 18, you don't have as much money, so you don't buy so many. And so the first chart I have just has the number of respondents per that category. It's interesting, but then again, it also doesn't show as much. So then I made another chart here, which is percentage of, so for each, maxed out chart, that's the percentage. So for example, at the 18, if you're younger than 18, 30% of the people that are younger than 18 have less than three pens. And then the less than 3 reduces to about 20% when they're 19 to 23, etc., going down. And then with actually an interesting spike at 51 plus of about 10% of the people then gaining only 3 pens again, or down to 3 or less. And then also obviously with the 50 plus, there's a steadily increasing percentage from nobody having more than 50 pens at 18 or younger to only about 5% of the people having 50 pens or more at 19 to 23, all the way to 70% of the people having 50 pens or more when they're 50 years or older. So I thought that was interesting. Moving on to your top 3 favorite pen brands. I know there's a little bit of friction here, but the number 1 brand by a pretty big margin was Pilot, and they got 55% of the votes. But so for those looking at these percentage points right now, keep in mind, because people were able to pick 3 of their top pen brands, that's why these percentages don't add up to 100, because people can choose more than one. So this is 55% of all respondents had Pilot somewhere in their answer. So I thought that was very interesting. So I'm just going to go over the top 3 because you can read the rest. Top is Pilot, obviously by 55%. Lamy is 41%, and then TWSBI is 32%. So I thought that was interesting. So going down to Grail pens, which may or may not have been included in people's top favorite brands. The top brand was Visconti with 10% of all the votes. So there was a bigger dispersion. So there was pens from everywhere. But what I did was I looked at it for if they said a Visconti, what's the new one? Divana, or a Visconti Homo Sapien, or if they even said a Visconti Homo Sapien London Fog specifically. But anything that said Visconti, I lumped into this. So the top 5 brands were Visconti, Pilot, Montblanc, Pelikan, and then Conid, Conid, I don't know how I pronounce it, but they're good. They're number 5 in this. So, and I've been seeing a lot more of their posts lately. I thought that was interesting. Maybe that's just the trend. And then going into specific pens, the number 1 specifically pointed out brand or pen was Visconti Homo Sapien. And then the second one, which I thought was interesting, was the Pilot Vanishing Point. Third was the Lamy 2000, and then the Pelican M800, and then the Pilot Custom 823. I thought this whole thing was very interesting because obviously each pen specifically had very more narrow of percentage points, because only 6% of people, which is the largest group, agreed on the same Grail pen. But yeah, I thought that was interesting to see where everybody's going. One thing I note about this is I'm not sure if people are not sure about what a Grail pen is, or at least how I used it. Maybe I should have specified in the question. To me, a Grail pen is the pen that you are striving for, the pen that you really want to spend that money on, that like end all be all of pens. So, but I think some people thought of it as like, in my collection, this pen I cherish the most. This is my holy grail. I think that's how some people interpret it, because I saw a lot of Pilot Metropolitans, TWSBI Ecos. So not to say that a TWSBI Eco or a Metropolitan can't be a ultimate pen of pens, but I think that because of maybe how I define it, they misinterpreted the question. But either way, this was the conclusion. Now moving on to the ink collection in, data. So this was my biggest F up, was I intended to ask how many inks of major colors do you own, but what I actually said was how many different colors of ink. That obviously it's a malformed question. The intention of this question was, if you own, a black, a blue, a purple, and that's it. But maybe you own like 5 different shades of purple and 3 different shades of blue and 2 different shades of black or something. I was just wanting to know if you get 3. So that's black, blue, and purple. So that was what the intention of this question was to be. Obviously, I screwed it up. And then even then, on the answers, I screwed it up too, because even on one of the later questions when I asked, what colors of ink do you own, or was your favorite color, I listed 16 different options. So I should have had at least that many, because maybe they have every color. So that was obviously a bad question, because the majority of people said they have 5+. So this question was bad, and I didn't extrapolate any data on it, because I wanted to see maybe people only have 2 different colors, but then they have 13 different ink shades. So that is interesting to me to see if they really dive into their favorite colors so much, or if they spread their ink interest around. So this was going to be the connecting question, which was how many unique ink shades do you have, which means you have 1 black, 2 blues, and 3 purples. That means you have 6 different shades of ink. So this was interesting, and it was a very even distribution of it, where there was a tie between 3 to 5 shades, 6 to 9 shades, or 16 to 20, 21 plus. So either people have anywhere from 3 to 5, or they have a butt ton, so a shelving full or something. We'll see. But I thought this was very interesting to see, because that's one of the most fun things about fountain pens, is you can really choose whatever ink you want. So, moving on, what color do you write with most on a daily basis? This one wasn't that much of a surprise, being that blue, then black, then blue-black. So that is what most people will use when going to school, work, whatever, which that's an answer for later. So for special occasion, it seems most people use purple. So purple was the most common, yes, purple, and then after that was blue again. I could have done a little bit more extrapolation of if people don't have a special occasion and they answered the same for that, if blue is their everyday ink and their special occasion ink. I probably could have dived into that, but there's so much information here, I just skipped it. And then the third most popular option, which actually surprised me a little, was green. So purple, blue, and then green. Not to say that green isn't a good color for special occasions. I just didn't expect it. So another one of my faults, as in a bad question, was shimmer versus shade. Obviously, that's not the only two options out there, and this doesn't give us as much information. But it seems that 84% of people prefer shading over shimmer. It doesn't say if they prefer sheen or if they don't prefer any shading. It just means that they prefer shading over shimmer. So unfortunately, this was another bad question. So therefore, the next question, which was the reasoning behind shimmer or shade, was even less meaningful. So I couldn't get any usable data off of this because also some people decided to answer, I just don't like it. Yes, I could have then added extra looking to find what they answered before and then determine, but in the end, it just wasn't, the data wasn't there. So I skipped that one. Moving on to the top 3 favorite brands of ink. So again, I'm just going to go over the top 3 and then you can read the rest. It's going to be somewhere on this screen. Number 1 was Diamine. I think that's how you pronounce it, with 48% of all respondents saying that they like that ink. Second was Pilot, and third was Noodlers. Another thing I could have done was see from those people that chose which pen brand I could have extrapolated what their favorite colors were. So that could have been another interesting thing. But again, that's a lot of information and a lot of extra work because the way that I was doing it, maybe somebody knows a better way, but it's very manually labor for me to do. And this survey took me a long time to get. Now, moving on to daily use. How many pens do you carry on a daily basis? And this was, the majority of people said they carry either 2 or 3 or 1. So people tend to carry 3 or less. I personally carry a Visconti 6-pen case, and I carry 6 pens with me because I have a 6-pen case. Not to say that, I just thought the 3-pen case looked a little weird, so I got the 6. I intended to put, a ballpoint for, times you needed for carbon paper and stuff like that. So what I expected to see in these results was a grouping of 1, a grouping of 3s, and a grouping of 6s. But I didn't see that, so I thought that was interesting. And then kind of going into that question, how do you carry your pens? So the vast majority of people carry it in a soft specialty case. So I assume it's, I don't know if you would consider this a soft specialty case. It's rigid, so I would consider it a hard case, even though it's soft to touch. But yeah, I would assume, that's the word. I would assume that like a Nock company or a pen wrap, that would be considered a soft case. So 35% of people carry it in a specialty soft case, and 22% of people carried it in a clothing pocket. And then the next grouping of people carried it in a pen slot of a bag, like a backpack, that sort of thing. So going into the last 2 questions, I was interested to see, for those who carried it in a clothing pocket, did they typically only carry 1 or did they carry more? So then I broke it down into, again, this is the number of responses per grouping. So, which, again, I left here even though it doesn't give that much information, but it also shows the popularity of it. So soft case people tend to have 3. So that would probably be a Nock company or a Nock Co. case. But if you then broke it down into the percentages of per carrying type, one of the things that I found interesting was people that typically carried it in a clothing pocket. There was a couple people that said they carried 8 or more, and I find that it was probably a weird thing. You probably got a couple in the breast pocket, a couple in your other pockets, and that's pretty big. Fountain pens aren't that thin, so I found that amusing. So here's that data, which I find very interesting. Moving on to how do you use your pens? And the vast majority of people use their pens at work and or school. And then journaling is also popular, the second most popular. And then going on down to signing documents. And the only thing is, I think, novelty in short story writing is very a niche thing because not everybody does it. I'm not creative enough to write a short story or a novel. I'm a data person, so I can see why those are lower in terms of popularity. So it's not really competition for this one. I just thought it was interesting to see how many people used it. And now on average, how many people how many pages do people write? I found this was an interesting graph. This is the only thing I think I put on a line because it was actually a very steady thing to say that there's a peak of people, or most people write about 2 pages, probably for notes and things like that per day, and then it's a slow, steady increase in the quantity. And then there's actually a little bit of spike for 7+. And I think if I probably went into the data, I could see that the people that said for novel writing as well as writing 7+ pages, even though it's not quite exactly the same number. But either way, interesting stuff. Here's another question that people didn't like, but I still think is quite valid. But I think, so what the complaint was for this one was that not everybody likes fine writing and they don't care about scratchiness so that sort of thing. So some people prefer medium nibs, wide nibs, italic nibs, that sort of thing. So I should have had another response to this question as not important to me, but still I found that in a lot of forum posts people say like, oh, well, Japanese extra fines are finer than European extra fines. So I wanted to see, well, how many people are really striving forward that Japanese extra fine or that Japanese fine? How important is that fine line to those people? Because obviously they've been saying a lot of that on posts. So it turns out that most people, which I'm not surprised of, enjoy some sort of balance. They don't like it scratchy, but they do kind of want something finer, like for note taking. I am sort of surprised. I thought it was going to be an even distribution with the majority balanced and then the rest of them being evenly split. But it turns out that very few people are so gung-ho about that extra fine line that they're going to discard any scratchiness just to get that fine line. And I think that's also because if you want such a fine line, you could probably go with a ballpoint. There's no reason to go for a fountain pen. Okay, no reason, because obviously 8% of the people who responded said that's what they want. But to me, I think that's a reasoning why there's less of those than, people wanting smooth is the most important. So going on to purchasing, I think there's no surprise here that the majority of us, when we go and buy, we go to a specialty pen store or a specialty online pen store such as Anderson, Goulet, Jet Pens, etc. So what I wanted to do with this question is I wanted to actually list all those out to see which is most popular, but I didn't have confidence in myself because just like I said Anderson, Goulet, Jet Pens, and I guarantee there's a buttload of other pen retailers out there that I'm not including, and I don't think it would be fair to not have a good list. So maybe next year I'll have a better list, but this is what I had. So I just grouped them all together. So obviously that's going to be the largest group. And I was actually surprised at how many people go to Amazon to buy their pens. Granted, this might be a little bit cheaper and they might have some pens that are out of date and that sort of stuff, but it was still interesting data. Okay, so on this question, some people didn't really like the question either. They wanted multiple answers, but I wanted people to think about if they were going to go research a pen, where would they go first? I didn't specify that in the question, and I didn't specify it. So I was kind of trying to see if people had to choose one place, where would they go to look about a pen? And much like myself, people chose YouTube. And then they also went to Search or Forum. And then after that was blogs. So this is very similar to me, but I found this interesting. Again, I should have specified this is the most trusted and or the first place you go, which I kind of think would go inside for each other. I mean, you go to your first most trusted place, or your most trusted place first. It's not like, I'm going to go to the dumpster to see if there's anything good in there. You go to a store first. Sorry, my dog has a little jingly thing. Okay, moving on. So when they're researching, what criteria is the most important? And what I was trying to find out was if their friend goes, hey friend, I think there's a interesting pen I think you should check out. And then you would reply, does it have or is it something? And if they say no, you go, I'm not interested. So meaning that, like, if you think about this, hey, there's a really interesting pen I want you to look at. Well, how expensive is it? $1,000. I'm not interested. So that kind of thing. So obviously there was a little bit of, I didn't word this one correctly, and there was such a wide range that, I had to put this in this kind of a bar chart. So you see there's a lot of different responses, and some people said, things like, the one thing I thought that was really good that I should have included was reviews. If a pen has really good reviews, that's something that is like a if it doesn't have good reviews, that would be a disqualifier, things like that. But the overwhelming majority of people wanted nib smoothness and pen looks as their first two priorities. And then, comfort and feel, which I can see that as good. So what I might do next year is have a select one type of thing and have, 3 separate questions. What is your primary, most important piece of information? And then have the second one as your second most important piece of information, or your quality for a pen, and so on. So, other than Grail pens, how much would you be willing to spend on a pen? And I think for the vast majority, as it shows, is $50. And, not everybody can afford an expensive pen. So what I think, and not to say $50 is expensive, but to some people $50 is expensive. And then also when I look at this kind of data, it doesn't tell you very much because the groupings is so large. 31% is 50, 28% is 100, and then 24% is 200. So that means, quick math here, 70% of all respondents said it was $200 or less, which doesn't tell you that much because, granted there's a long range, but pens can be, a bunch of pens. I made a list when I was trying to make another YouTube video, or I was thinking about it. This is many pens that are under $50 to $100. There's that many pens that are $0 to $25, and that many pens that are $25 to $50. So maybe I should have, broken up the amount of money a little bit smaller into smaller chunks, like $10, $20, $30, $40, $50, and so on. So that way we can get more accurate of information. Okay, now here's an interesting section for me was the community information, because fountain pens is also a community thing. So the first question was, what was your first fountain pen? My fountain pen didn't make this list because it's not very popular, or it wasn't, because that's a story for a different day. But everybody's story is unique of how they got into the community. Maybe they were given a pen. Maybe they just stumbled into a store and saw something they liked and they bought it. That's how I got into it, and etc. So the top pen that people seem to have is the Pilot Metropolitan, which maybe that is a store, something that's in a store often. So the number one was the Pilot Metropolitan, then the Lamy Safari, and then the All-Star. And then the next one, which I found was interesting, was a lot of people said that their first fountain pen was a Sheaffer school pen, so a pen that was in their school that was given to them. I found that was interesting. And then the last one was a Parker Vector. Excuse me. So then, when you go away from just the brand or the specific pen, it seems that Pilot is the undisputed champion of first pen brands, being that they have a bunch of pens that are under $20, and and then also when you looked at the first pen, it has Lamy Safari and the Lamy All Star. So those combined, it's still Lamy and kind of the same nib and such. So Lamy actually caught up to Pilot a little bit more, only by about 30, roughly 30 people had Lamy pens as their first pen, only about 30 less people had Lamy pens than Pilot people had as their first pens. And then third was Parker, and then Schaefer, and then found it interesting that Waterman, there was a bunch of people that had Waterman's as their first pen brand. So then, if you were to give a pen to a new somebody who's not in the community or not in the hobby, and you wanted to gift them a pen to maybe get them into it, what pen would you choose? And so this again was interesting obviously we've been in the community for a little while, we've done research, we've bought other pens, and so this pen seems to embody something that's not too expensive typically, because you don't want to, if they're not in the community already, you don't know if they're going to continue it. So it's something that's fairly inexpensive, reliable, and something that is going to be good because it's your friend. You're not going to give them, here, have this piece of crap. And you're not going to do that. So, or at least I wouldn't. Some people, I don't know. So the number one choice was the Pilot Metropolitan. For 28% of people said that that's the pen that they would gift. And then a quick drop down to 15% people would say the Lamy Safari. And then third would be the TWSBI Eco. And then Platinum Preppy, and then the All-Star, which were 5% combined. So that was a very steep drop after that. But one of the things I found interesting was the TWSBI Eco. And I know it's also more of a new pen, so that's also why it doesn't have much of a, people saying first pens, because it's fairly new. So, but from that to then people recommending it as a first pen for somebody else, it increased. So the people that said that was their first pen was only 22 people, as compared to 217 and 282 people that had the Pilot Metropolitan and the Safari, respectively. So, and then going into how many people would recommend it for the next one. Oh, sorry, I mixed those numbers up. But either way, from, So, it increased by the people that had Eco as their first pen to then recommending it. Okay, I'm totally tripping on my words here because I'm combining into the next category. So hang on. So there was it increased by 591%. So saying that the number of people that would gift that pen, as opposed to people that had it as a first pen, would very steeply increase. So I think that one is a very interesting, because it really shows that it's a good stable pen, especially for a first pen. I know I voted for that one because it's interesting. You get to see the ink, which is part of the good qualities. I think that would get people into it more. So here's the thing I found interesting. Because the Metropolitan and the Safari were such big heavy hitters for that's their first pen, and that was the pen that they would recommend, I was interested to see for those people, so for the 377 people who said that this was if the Metro was their first pen, how many people would then say, I want to give a Metropolitan as a gift to somebody else who's first starting out? And so 51% of Metropolitan first owners would also then give a Metropolitan as a pen. And then it went down to the TWSBI Eco as the number 2 pen that Metropolitan owners would then change to. And then people would change camps, and 12% of people that had a Metropolitan would then give a Lamy Safari. And then on the reverse side, the Lamy Safari owners, only 26% of Lamy Safari first pen owners would give it as a first pen to somebody else. So I thought that was interesting. It's a bit of a steeper drop, so maybe people don't like the Safari as much. I think the biggest problem with the Safari is people don't like that triangle grip. So people got it, didn't like it, so they wouldn't recommend it. So I thought that was interesting. This question I wanted to do more on because this is the question for what's one thing you wish you knew when you first started? And I really wanted this to be something we would compile, have a good amount of information on it, and people could then have a good database of like really good first advice that you wish you knew. But all the answers were so unique, and even if you're talking about inks, like some person might say like, oh well, try only a few good inks, or many people could have been talking the same thing but from totally different directions, and with 1,326 responses that were all unique, it was just too much data for me to categorize and put into any sort of data. So I'm going to still work on this maybe a little bit later, but it's a little bit too much for me to do right now, so I'm sorry about that. It's still there. So I'm going to go quickly through these couple bits of information. It's not that interesting, but it's still interesting to know. So for the vast majority of us, we know less than 5 people in real life that also own a fountain pen, and a good portion of us also don't know anybody else that uses fountain pens in real life. And then, transferring onto that, most people haven't introduced anybody who stayed in the hobby, and then a little bit more have introduced less than 5. Because, let's be honest, it's hard to get somebody into a fountain pen that, you have to work a little bit harder on, where most people at my work, they see me using a fountain pen, they're like, oh, why do you do that? When I have, look at this free pen, I found it on the desk, I'm just going to use that, why not, so. And then, of course, when you're talking to people about fountain pens, what is the biggest compelling reason why, you use a fountain pen, or you might suggest that they use a fountain pen? Again, this is something that I didn't translate very well, or, that was, might not have been the best thing, but for the most part, most people said that it makes writing fun, which I agree on. And then other people, the other two, they're also very low, as you can see on this chart, is a lot of other people really like the fact that you can choose any color of ink you want. And I find that the most fun too, other than, it makes all writing fun. So this is where I had a little bit of extra fun in. So first, let's go into social media sites. So what social media sites do you belong to? And the number one site that people talk about fountain pens on, and they're members of, is the Fountain Pen Network, the FPN. And that had 50% of all the votes at 757 respondents said that they went, or they go to FPN. And the second place was also 50% of the votes at Reddit, which is 751. So it's a very slim margin. And then it was a quicker drop-off of Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Fountain Pen Geeks, Twitter, other Discord. And then the two honorable mentions that I added onto this, which their numbers are arbitrarily low. I didn't include them in the actual list, but there were so many respondents who in the other tab, they clicked other and then wrote in, there's one that said Pentrace and Goulet. So between the two of them, they had 53 people say that they go to either of those. So there was 33 people that specifically said that they go to Pentrace, and 20% of people that specifically go to Goulet. I didn't include Goulet Pen Company because it's more of a blog. I guess I didn't know that there was a community there. I thought it was a blog, but obviously I'm wrong. Okay, so this is where I started with the additional data because so I was interested for, obviously you could select more, one, more, or all of these sites. So you could say that you're part of Facebook, Fountain Pen Geeks, Fountain Pen Network, Reddit, etc. Or you could just say you're a part of one. So what I wanted to know is for the most popular websites, how likely are people to be members of other sites? So as you can see with this one, so the Fountain Pen Network, the most common other site that people are connected to is Facebook. And then there's another piece of information that I'll get into later. So if you're looking at this data yourself, when it says Fountain Pen Network and then Fountain Pen Network as well on the chart, that means people are only members of that site, which I have further down on this survey or data. So for Reddit members are also most likely to be also members of the Fountain Pen Network. And then for Facebook, they are most likely to be members of the Fountain Pen Network. And then people that go to YouTube are also most likely to be members of Fountain Pen Network. So that's a little bit of a theme. Maybe that's just because that's the majority of the data, but it seems that Fountain Pen Network is the most popular. So here's an interesting thing, because I started to find out which people, or if you're a member of a certain site, which site has the most isolated users. As in, if you're a member of this site, you're not a member of any other site. And the winner of that is Reddit. So 23% of all people that wrote Reddit as their site that they are a member of, 23.8% of them are not members of any other site, or at least they didn't elect to say that. So, and then Facebook at 10%, Goulet, I think that's an interesting thing, because some of these sites, such as Goulet, the others, Twitter, and I did put it on Twitter. I didn't put the survey on, so for those people that are only members of, Discord or other things like that, I don't know how they found out about this survey, but hey, I think they just didn't click the other ones that they were members of. So, going back to my little rant from earlier, I was told when I was posting this survey on a certain site that I wasn't taking into consideration the demographic of that site. So I decided to look into it, of which sites maybe are older on average, which sites had more females and males than others. So like just the general demographics of each social media site. So because there's so much data, I kind of really broke out the first 5, and then I did an overall later. But so for Fountain Pen Network, you can see, I'm just going to go through these because this is a lot of data, and it's what you make of it. It's not really one thing or the other. But I will say that it seems that according to this, Reddit is the most male-dominated, and Instagram is the most female. I wouldn't say dominated because they're not a majority. Females make the most. Is the largest percentage of females on that social media site on Instagram. And one thing I found was interesting was that Facebook seems to have the oldest audience on average, and Reddit seems to have the youngest audience on average. So I thought that was interesting. So going on down to here, where I have it broken out in 2 different ways. The first is for any given social media network, what's the percentages of ages. So, just looking at the first one, Facebook has the largest grouping of green, which is the 51 plus. So as you can see, that's the largest percentage of, largest age percentage in that group. Sorry, I forgot about the camera. I was pointing at my screen where the data is. And then on the next one is, for any given age group, what's the likeliness of them being a member of a certain site? So as you can see, yellow is Reddit, and there's a continuing, or for your perspective, a continuing decrease as people go from 18 to 51. Less and less people, as they're older, are on Reddit, which may be just a symptom of, they don't know about it or whatever. I don't think people leave the site because they're older. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun information I had. It's not necessarily a part of the fountain pens, but it was just interesting, so maybe you can know what your group is that you're talking to or what you're a member of. So this question was a little odd. I initially had 3 questions where it was, what opinion do you have that you think that the community doesn't agree with you? What pen that you like that people don't like? What pen do you not like that people like? So these questions I kind of lumped into one after I found the results from the first question, which was, what is an opinion you have that most people don't agree with you? First off, there was a very narrow margin where people agreed on anything. So the responses were so widespread that it was hard for me to get any data. And so I just got data from the first one, and the others actually were a lot of repeats and things like that. So I just didn't include them. So that's that. But so for the what opinion you have that most people don't agree with you in, most people said something about inks. Most people had something to say about a specific manufacturer. And then a lot of people had specific things to say about nibs, whether they like a fine nib, they dislike a fine nib, they like wide, they don't like wide, they like italic, they think wides are impractical, flexes are impractical, something like that. And then the next grouping of people had specific pens that they didn't like or specific pens that they really liked. And then the last one was something about Chinese pens. So they either like or they don't like them. So when I went into the specific opinions, the number one dislike was a dislike of Lamy as a whole. Like, it's not because they said they dislike the Lamy 2000 specifically. It's that I don't like Lamy. Sorry. So that was 20 people specifically said that. Granted, there was other people that said, dislike the Lamy 2000, dislike the Lamy Safari, etc. But I mean, there was fewer of those numbers. But specifically, people that said, I don't like Lamy. And then the number 2 response was people specifically don't like Chinese pens or Chinese knockoffs. There was a mixture of both. I just kind of grouped them together. But either way, they don't like Chinese pens. Then the next was a dislike of the Metropolitan, which is tied for a dislike of Noodlers as a whole. And then the next 2 that were tied was a dislike of Noodlers ink specifically, and a dislike of Shimmer ink. So those are very interesting. So then if you also combine things, if you combine both Noodlers dislike as a whole and then Noodlers ink specifically, that's the number 1, and then going down to Lamy as a whole, Chinese, Metropolitan, and then Shimmer. So my final thoughts on this, obviously I made a lot of mistakes, and I really hope that we can do this again next year so that way we can see how the community grows. But I need help on this because I'm obviously not that great at proofreading my own stuff. But maybe we can, I'm going to try to maybe reach out to some of the bigger names in the community like Matt Armstrong, Brian Goulet. I know Anderson Pens makes the pen noobs, I don't know. But I would like to maybe, reach out to them. Maybe we'll do a collab so that way this can be really a community thing instead of it just being I'm going to make this survey. So it'll be really the super community survey that it'll encompass everything, and everything will be well written, hopefully, and well worded. So thank you for sticking in this far. For those who have been sticking in this far for the giveaway, there is 2 requirements I am going to put on this giveaway. So the first requirement is so let me reiterate what this giveaway is. I am going to give away a Lamy Aeon, which is my favorite pen, and I understand it is still unavailable in the US. So I have the unique ability to be here in Germany, able to pick up a pen for those who want it. The Aeon comes in 2 colors, this black, and they call it olive, which is more of just like a metal color. I don't know why they called it olive. Maybe I'm slightly colorblind, but not that colorblind. It looks metal to me. So what I want for you to win is A, be a subscriber to my YouTube channel, and B, write a comment on this video to say what data you found most interesting. So those are the 2 requirements, and today is the 27th of October. Hopefully I will be able to get this uploaded today. But either way, I'm going to make a stopping or an end of this. So you need to subscribe and comment before the 4th of November. And on the 4th of November, I'm going to do a drawing where it takes a random comment. I'm going to take that comment and cross-reference to see if you are a subscriber. If you are, I will make a video showing me doing this, so a screen capture, and I will send that person an YouTube message saying, "You have won. Please tell me what color and what nib size you want for this, and an address." That person has give them 72 hours to respond. So you have 3 days to respond. If they do not respond, I will do another video saying that the person didn't respond, and I will do a new drawing. And so yes, that is the general rule and the guidance for the giveaway. Again, this is my favorite pen, and I think it's just very sad that not everybody can get it yet, but it's just my favorite pen. So anyway, thank you for staying in this long. I know some of you might have just came just for the giveaway, but either way, check out my YouTube videos. I'm doing them slowly. I'm not trying to make this a career. This is just a fun hobby on top of a hobby. So anyway, yeah, thanks for watching.